Last year, I had the privilege to be asked to take part in this project for Mark, who is one of the senior commercial managers with Lloyds Bank. And a little bit of background to Mark. He is someone who's just a lovely, lovely guy, but 2018 was really tricky for him. He was diagnosed eventually after lots of tests with an autoimmune condition that has affected his lungs. And as a result, he's down to 2/3 of a normal lung capacity. And he's also developed diabetes, so he has to have regular insulin injections. And he was basically told he might have 3 years to live. So he had a pretty tough year that year. And he got what he says is the opportunity of a lifetime. He was selected, a very rigorous selection process that Lloyds Bank run nationally, to take part in this walk in Cambodia, which was about 80 kilometres, very high temperatures, very humid, very basic conditions. They were camping, carrying all their gear, really tough trek. And he was a little bit concerned about whether he'd be fit enough to do it. But anyway, he did get selected, and he wanted to make a difference to the community. So normally when somebody's doing one of those treks, or a plane jump, or coal fire walking, whatever it is, these people are asked to raise a certain amount of money. So the money he was asked to raise was $4,000. And he said, no, I really want to try and beat that. I really want to try and make a big impact, because over the 2018 year, when I've been having a tough time mentally and physically in and out of hospital, few people that I know really well have just occasionally picked up the phone to me and said, hi, Mark, how are you? How's it going? How are you doing? And he said, without those calls, and nothing to do with work, although a lot of people obviously he knew were through his work, nothing to do with that. It was just people getting in touch and keeping him on track, and that in that very difficult period for him. So we set out to make a difference to the community. So he works in Herefordshire, Worcestershire, Gloucestershire, sort of West Midlands area. And he gave us, or we settled on 3 objectives. Now, of course, everybody who knows anything about marketing knows you should have 1 objective, maybe 2, and if you're really lucky, 3. So this was quite diverse. So the challenges were around supporting people who are actually in the middle of having poor mental health as a problem they were facing, particularly at work. He wanted everybody to be involved in the project to get something out of it. So either in terms of strengthening their own mental health, or if they led teams or bigger businesses, that they would put things in place in their business to support others going through that, and understand what sort of things would be helpful and what things would be unhelpful, because it's a subject that just isn't talked about. Particularly middle-aged blokes, I have to say, do not tend to talk about this sort of stuff. And then the actual raising the money. So because he had no budget, because people kindly donated stuff and time, I can say that 100% of the money he raised went to that cause, which is amazing. And we raised well over his initial target, even though we raised that twice. So the main challenge on our no budget was publicity. You couldn't buy advertising space. Had no website. He did use LinkedIn a little bit, but quite rarely, not a lot. Didn't have a load of connections on there. No presence on Facebook, Twitter or YouTube, and yet we needed to be successful. We needed to get lots of bums on seats. We needed to get people to do fundraising events. He wanted to run events to help people understand mental health in the workplace. And we needed that content to go on, because those events were spaced out over several months. We need to keep it on the radar for that challenging length of time. So that's the challenge that he sort of presented us with. So how did we go about doing that? Well, the first thing we did was we decided he was going to need some sort of brand name. So we used the alliteration, and we ended up with Mark's Mental Health Marathon, which is a bit long and a bit unwieldy to say, but that was kind of the best we could do. We were working very quickly, I have to say. That's how we decided to brand it. So we set up and hosted a website. It's very basic. I don't know if any of you have seen it, but it is just a blog website. It's not fancy. It hasn't got lots of pretty pictures on it. It hasn't got any automation on it. I don't think it's even got a contact us page. It is just literally an information page where people can find information about that particular project and what was going on. But we needed that as a hub, somewhere to put videos, blogs, photos, and all the fundraising news. We needed one place to put that so that we could connect that up with social media IT software that I use, so we could post out to all these different social media accounts in the most efficient way. So we were on 3 or 4 LinkedIn accounts, our Facebook account at Aardvark, because we couldn't seem to get Mark connected up to enough people quickly. So we just used the Aardvark one as the default. Twitter, we've got 3 Twitter accounts running from that software. And YouTube we used a little bit, but it wasn't the main focus. We did record one of the seminars. And then we use this drip-feed approach. So all the events coming up through the year, everyone would have a new story about what had been raised or who was there or what prizes were given. People very generously donated prizes for raffles. And we wanted to keep the whole business community engaged and active in promoting it. So those that couldn't donate, we asked, can you just share the posts on social media so that more people see this and more people get involved? Smaller businesses made a voluntary donation. We didn't ask anybody to pay for the events and seminars. They were very welcome to come along for free, but we suggested a donation, I think, of about 20 quid or 25 quid to come along to those sessions. And we were very well supported. And then some of the bigger corporates, particularly those that Mark had known and worked with for a while, were very generous and became our corporate sponsors. So it was a question of press releases. Worcestershire Chamber, Hereford and Worcester Chamber, and Worcestershire Let also supported us by publicising that. It's a question of having that strategy in place and keep going with it. So here are some of the events. So mainly we did quiz nights. We did several quiz nights, which we knew from past experience people would support in terms of a charity giving and have a bit of fun as well. So we did those. Jeremy Horton, who's a quite famous artist, if you're into your art, did 2 exhibitions, one locally at Webb's, which was very kindly hosted for free, and he did another one in London for some of the corporates. And then we ended up having a lovely candlelit carol service at the end of the year in Worcester, just for the business community. And again, we had several hundred people attend that. It was a fantastic event. The seminars, if anybody would like to see these presentations, they are hosted on that website. I can send you a link. Basically, this was the giving back and this was the educational piece. So we ran 2 in one day, one in the morning at RGS and then hopped over to Hereford for the afternoon, one at Malvern College and then one at Ross Labels down in Ross on Wye, where they've got a lovely intimate cinema setting. And obviously food and drinks on sale there, so they had a lovely reception there. And the presentations were all the same format. So we had speakers that gave their time for nothing very generously. Mental Health UK, who were the charity that the money was going to, spoke about what they're doing for the charity and their new projects for next year, their association with Lloyds Bank and how that was working. And they spoke a little bit about mental health for yourself, the sort of things that you can do for self-help, and that was great. Then they had a solicitor from Harrison Clark Rickaby's who was talking about employing people and discrimination against people with mental health, how not to end up in a tribunal, how to help people back to work in a supportive way. Obviously some stories about employers that had not done it in a supportive way. That was an interesting session. And then we had a speaker from the school, usually talking about how they were managing pupils and staff and looking after them. And Ian Smith from Bishop Fleming was an amazing speaker. He's a carer himself, as well as heading up that big firm of accountants. They're an international firm, and he has a personal regime that really helps him. And he also has set up across the business ways of supporting his staff mentally, because they do quite challenging jobs that sometimes are, very demanding in terms of hours, long hours, and hard work and demanding customers. So he told us how he'd instigated that at Bishop Fleming. So if anybody is interested in any of those presentations, you're very welcome to have them, and I will send them to you afterwards. And then we had the corporates, the people that were extremely generous, not only with their donations, but we felt they should have something more than just a sponsor's logo on the events. So we decided that I would go out and do an individual interview with a lot of these business leaders and just try and find out, A, why they were supporting Mark, which was an interesting conversation itself. There was quite often a background, somebody they knew who'd had a mental health problem. Their willingness to support him came from that knowledge of what it was like. Or they needed to know more, and they knew they needed to know more for their team. They felt they weren't particularly well educated about it. So that was that sponsorship. And then trying to find out where the businesses started from, where they ended up, what made them tick, because people like to know about people. So these interviews, each one took me about a day. As you can see, some of them, there's GB Liner's head there, has obviously got lovely professional photos that he let me have, no problem. Others were a little bit more reticent. The guys at County here, the guys at Tudor, just getting them in front of a camera was a challenge, even though, these guys are very generous with their time and support a lot of charities. So we did have a big check. There's Sutcliffe and Tudors with the check, but not everybody had that. So we did do one interview that never got sent out because I simply didn't get any photographs to go with it. It just sat there and never got publicised. It was a shame. But people were interested in that, particularly Ian Smith, because so many people know Ian. It was great. We used that almost like an influencer marketing campaign. That wasn't really the intention when we started. But because people were interested in him and they were interested in what he had to say, we got a lot of clicks, likes, shares, you name it, we got it. People were very interested. So it wasn't a beauty contest as to who got the most likes, but there were some differences in those businesses. This guy at Spectra in Herefordshire came along to the seminar at Hereford and was so enthused about the project, he became a corporate sponsor. He's not a Lloyd's client. He didn't know Mark from Adam when they started, but some of his staff came to the seminar and got an awful lot out of it. And then we had the trek itself in October. Obviously, this was the thing that most worried Mark, because he was a bit concerned about his own health and how he would actually manage the trek and manage to keep all his needles clean and sterile throughout the week and just, managing the humidity levels and getting oxygen into his body and all of that. And he got there, and what he said as a result of all of that was teamwork is amazing. He said, if you've got a big team, everybody's supportive. He said everybody managed all of it, even though some people were struggling with their fitness levels, in the worst case than he was. He said everybody got through. So it's a real learning experience, a real bonding experience for him, I think. And we got some feedback, which we shared, but that stopped midweek because they had no internet connection. There was no way of getting any more photos to us. So we had the initial photo at Heathrow came through to me on the Monday. These were drip thread Tuesday, Wednesday, and then it stopped. But fortunately, by then, people were already sharing this story, and that was great. And the end of the year, this came out of talking to Richard Johnson, who is his minister, and Mark's heavily involved in his church. And we decided we'd try and pull it all together with a thank you. And we had a candlelit service, and that's going to be repeated this year. If anybody would like to come along, it really is a nice experience. And whether you're religious or not, or whether you've been in a church for a while or not, it's a really nice thing to do. And what you can't really see from the photograph, because it was dark, there's about 100 odd people in that space at the back of the church, having a natter, having a drink, talking about the project, making connections. It was a really nice networking event. The church welcomed us so well. They were looking forward to hosting us. They couldn't do enough for us. It was really lovely. And the last bit of publicity really was to get Mark to talk on BBC Hereford and Worcester. And again, if you want to hear the interview that Kate did with her lovely Mark, as she termed him, the lovely, lovely Mark, you can listen to that. So what did all of that get us? I was feeding back data to Mark every month about how many social shares we got. Obviously, we wanted the money, and the money raised was amazing. Brilliant that we did far better than we'd really envisaged on that front. But more than 200 businesses engaged with that message. So obviously, they felt the need for education around mental health. People often want to help, but they didn't know what to do, and they didn't know how to implement systems in their business to help others. So those practical seminars was really, the information they actually needed. They didn't want to interfere and say something wrong. So they're kind of nervous and pussyfooting around having a conversation. And those seminars really opened up conversations. So that was fantastic. So yeah, that's what we did. Social media shares, PR coverage, budget, nothing. And we paid for the website and hosted it. I had one pull-up banner, which was very kindly donated by Simon Hodgetts at SB Print. I offered to pay him, he wouldn't have it. But it's time and more time. So when people say to you, this is really one of my bugbears about marketing, social media is free, you just got to do it. It's not really free. It takes a lot of time to do it properly. So no, you're not investing cash from your business. But to say each one of those interviews took me over a day, and getting people to events is not easy. There's a lot of work involved. It is time and time and time. So that's what we achieved. Very proud of what we achieved. It really was a privilege to be involved. This is my little plug about me, Peter. I hope you don't mind one slide. This is what Mark had to say.
You're very welcome.
I think
that's the idea.
Yeah, what he really appreciated was he had some ideas, but he had no idea how to implement them effectively. And he liked this bouncing back of like what will work, what will not work. It's quite a privilege to have somebody allow you to go on to their social media profiles and post on their behalf. This is a senior manager, and he allowed me just to basically post whatever I liked. And manage that campaign for him. And he hadn't done anything like this before. So I was grateful for that. But this is the really important, this is the bit that counts. We have raised this issue because Mark is so dedicated and so committed. We've raised this issue. Now people are actually talking about it. Now there are policies in place in lots of businesses. Now there's someone they can actually be assigned to go and talk to. Now managers know how to handle those return to work calls. They will call when people are off to see how they are. If you've got any concerns about people, we now are less afraid to make the call and say, how are you? How are you, mate? How's it going? And if we've given more people the courage to do that, then that's great. This is a cheeky request. Mark is currently running a draw for the Worcester Food Bank, and it closes on Friday. So if anybody wants to help out with that, I think they've already raised nearly 40k. If anybody's interested, there's a Formula One shirt signed by the Red Bull team. Whether you're interested or not, if you want to donate to that, we'd be really grateful. I'll share that with you afterwards. And that's it. So, bootstrap marketing can work. I think it can work really well if you are committed to what you're doing and you really feel that getting the message out there is important and you invest some time in doing it. It can be done even on no budget.